So moving on finally to aerobic circuit training, let me just move this across. We've now got the idea that we can use circuit training, which we've already had a good look at, but we can use it for aerobic endurance or aerobic fitness purposes. And I've already sketched onto the screen here the simplest perhaps format that this could be used within. I'm kind of making an assumption here that we're basing this circuit training in some kind of gym that's got fixed equipment and therefore the access to these different machines I'm going to refer to. I'm focusing a lot in this circuit on the concept or the principle of training of variation and of the second T of fit, okay, the type. Because by looking at circuit training for aerobic endurance development, we can introduce a lot of different types or at least methods of training, even though it is ultimately a circuit in nature. So just as a very simple example, we might start over here. We might do 5 minutes on a treadmill, and we're looking for that 80% of max heart rate, which is towards the upper end of our aerobic health, cardiovascular health kind of training zone. We're going to do 5 minutes, move straight onto the rower at 80%, straight onto the stepper at 80%, straight onto the bike at 80%, and then straight onto the wave machine. And I meant to put here actually at 80% max HR, max heart rate. And the point we'd make here is that the time in between these is probably going to be enough time to move from equipment to equipment, to get a drink, to towel down, to do whatever you want to do. But ultimately, it adds variation into the training. Let's also look sort of analytically at what have we got here. We've got 25 minutes, and this might be the first session we do. We've got 25 minutes of activity. So it begins to help us to meet the requirements of things like continuous training as well. Now, you might remember I previously said continuous training for aerobic cardiovascular health development is 20 minutes minimum. And we're saying here that we'd cover a total of 25 minutes, albeit with probably a minute in between each section. Now, because we've got a gap in between each section, we can go at the upper end of our heart rate zone. 85 would be right at the upper end and might come into play when we develop our intensity. But what we can say here is that because we've got these little breaks built in, let's say a minute to go in between, we can indeed make it sort of at that upper end of the heart rate target training zone. A couple of other things before I'd like to sort of finish off here. If we do target 80%, okay, so if we do target 80%, that only gives us a small amount of range to go to, because we can only really go up to 85% when we increase intensity in other training sessions like this. So what we would tend to find here is that we might build into this activity manipulation of frequency and time. So again, we've got these 5 minute periods. These 5 minutes may well go up. Also remember that the other way to manipulate time is that you can actually reduce the resting period or the interim period, so you can reduce how much recovery you've got in between, so quite literally move from one to the other. And finally, I want to introduce to you that I've kind of presented this in this kind of gym model, but this also could be in like a sports hall, you know, or sort of like a school gym type setting. So we could replace a lot of these activities. So I'm just going to give you some alternatives. We could do, for example, shuttles, running to and fro between two cones, for example. We could use step. What I mean by step is sort of onto a bench type activity. We could use, for example, jogging on the spot, say within those within that kind of environment. In other words, we can replace some of this equipment based activity for more subtle or more simple ways of structuring training, structuring these circuits without that sort of requirement for equipment. And I think it's interesting to think about it in that sense. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks.